Welcome to State of Mind, being human and living well.
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 I'm Debra Sloss, a licensed marriage and family therapist and your host. These are undeniably hard times. Wars rage, political divisions widen, essential services face funding cuts, and many are dealing with job loss, financial insecurity, and unprecedented levels of uncertainty in our daily lives. Amid all of this, how do we care for ourselves, and why is that important? In this episode, Self-Care for Hard Times, Soul Food to Nourish Resilience, we'll hear directly from listeners about the practices that help them get through life's most challenging moments. Yes, this is a show about self-care. How do we support our mental and physical health? But it's also about something deeper. These soul food practices can help us process trauma, build resilience, and remain emotionally present for ourselves and those around us. When we nourish our own souls, we become more resourced, better able to extend compassion, offer support, and stay grounded in the face of adversity. Today, we'll hear personal reflections from community members about the practices that nourish them. I'm also joined by returning guest Kara Bowman, a psychotherapist and colleague, to help unpack how these choices support mental, emotional, and even physical health. Kara Bowman is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Santa Cruz, California. She holds advanced certifications in grief, trauma, nonviolent communication, and thanatology, the study of death and dying. Kara is deeply committed to destigmatizing mental health and helping people find the support they need. Her own self-care includes reading, walking, cooking, and spending time with family, including her 2 young grandchildren. Welcome back to State of Mind, Kara. I'm so glad to have you here to talk about how we can care for ourselves when life gets especially hard.
Thank you so much, Debra. Thank you so much for having me back because I'm excited to talk about this subject. It's so important right now, and it's always nice to talk with you. Let me take a second to introduce you in case your listeners don't know you. Debra Sloss is a licensed marriage and family therapist with 30 years of experience. She's certified in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, and trained in internal family systems and narrative therapy. For over a decade, she mentored new clinicians. Now retired from private practice, producing State of Mind is her way of transforming years of clinical experience into community care. Her self-care includes time with family, biking, swimming, yoga, gardening, savoring awe in nature, and these days taking deliberate breaks from the news cycle.
Thanks, Kara. In this episode, we'll be hearing a series of audio stories first submitted by listeners back in 2022, just as we were emerging from a global pandemic. After each personal story, Kara and I will reflect on how the self-care practices that these listeners talk about supports mental and physical well-being, and how they help build resilience, nurturing our bodies and minds, and serving as food for the soul in hard times. But first, a few short definitions to set the stage. Self-care is the practice of intentionally supporting your physical, emotional, and mental health, whether through rest, setting boundaries, connecting with others, or engaging in calming activities. What do we mean by hard times? Hard times are periods marked by personal or collective challenges, like illness, loss, financial strain, or larger societal unrest that disrupt our well-being. And finally, what does it mean to grow resilience? Resilience is our ability to maintain or recover mental health in the face of adversity. It doesn't mean avoiding pain. It means finding ways to move through it, and in some cases, even growing stronger from the experience. So let's go ahead and begin with our first self-care story from Cindy.
Hello,
My name is Cindy, and I'm a mother of two boys, aged 20 and 17, and two boxers. Last year, I hopped on the trend and quit my job to take a gap year and think about what I wanted to do next. As a lifelong multitasker with borderline OCD, that left me with a lot of time on my hands and a possible opportunity to spin out of control in an effort to fill that void. One of my biggest fears has always been becoming irrelevant, so I feel anxious and isolated when the phone stops ringing. So this was a big transition. Now, I know it sounds incredibly basic, but the best way I've found to keep the gremlins at bay are exercise, eating right, doing good deed, and cuddling with my dogs. I thought about not even making this recording because none of those things are novel or new. But that said, I figure if I pile on another vote for the basics, it might serve as a good reminder. Benefits of exercise compound in multiple ways, right? I feel good about myself for showing up. Getting my heart rate up and getting a good sweat gives me energy. I know I sleep much better, and any good habit that you establish makes you realize that you can start another good habit. If you want to know the science behind the whole habit thing, check out the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He's got that pretty well nailed. Eating right has a lot of the same positive effects as working out, but it also allows you to think more clearly and gives you a sense of accomplishment and control. I've recently switched our family to mostly vegetarian at the request of our teenager, and it's amazing how good those recipes can be. Instead of having a meatless Monday, we now have a Meat Monday, since we only have it once a week. And if you're ever at a loss for good recipes, hop onto Pinterest and you'll have everything at your fingertips. As far as doing a good deed and those benefits, there's been a ton of research providing that nothing gives you a bigger lift than helping others. It doesn't have to take a ton of time or any money. Just something simple like trying to smile at the 5 people you see at the grocery store can make a difference. I happen to be a universal donor from a blood perspective because of my blood type. So when I really want to fill the bank, I donate. Now, obviously, I can't do that too often. On the dog front, I'm certainly not suggesting that one of you that you go get a dog if you aren't ready for that commitment. But if you do have a dog or a close friend with one, I highly recommend a few sessions a week where you chill out with one. They are the best model of how to really relax, and no person is ever going to be that happy to see you. So just listening to this podcast is a great start, so please know I'm sending positive thoughts your way. Have a great day.
So, Kara, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the things that Cindy's shared?
Well, lots of things jumped out at me. A couple of them are that good deeds, which Cindy talked about, can be very, very little in order to contribute to self-care. There are many positive mood effects for quite a while, even from letting another car in traffic or holding open a door, which are very minor things to do. The other thing that jumped out at me is that novel experiences are really good for us. And Cindy talked about establishing good habits. She didn't do what she had done in the past, but she decided to do something different with her feelings of being isolated and irrelevant. So she did many new things and established new habits. And this can really have positive effects on mental health and well-being. It reduces stress and anxiety and depression, and enhances positive affect and adaptability, and even helps creativity.
Wonderful. Yeah, I also noticed that Cindy talked about the importance of eating well, but it's also really important to remember the importance of eating, period. I mean, I have found over the years with clients that many of them forget to eat or eat infrequently, and that just eating regularly can really help maintain and support mood. In many of the 12-step programs, I've heard from clients that they use this acronym called HALT. And this helps people take a a self-inventory and really take better care of themselves. And it's an excellent skill to practice asking yourself first, for the H, am I hungry? Then, for the A, am I angry? Then, am I lonely for the L? And T, am I tired? And if we pay attention to these things, this is often pretty profound self-care for the body and mind. So next we hear from Zach, who takes a more kinetic route to self-care. For him, soul food comes through movement, challenge, and a deep connection with the body. Here's Zach.
My name is Zachary Greenberg. There are a few things that touch my soul the way cycling does. The bike can take me anywhere I'm looking to go, and it gives me the escape and release I need after being bunched up in the busy city. Cycling seems to grow with me wherever I go, whether it's in the Santa Cruz Mountains weaving in between redwood trees, or New York City weaving in between taxis and dog walkers. My partner and I moved to New York last year, and it's been a huge shift in both of our lives. Cycling looks a lot different here, but as a lot of things change around me, cycling stays constant. Cycling started out as being a form of fitness, but it's become more and more essential for my mental health. When I'm out riding, my heartbeat rises and falls. My head starts to clear out all the thoughts that cripple my mind. If I'm dealing with depressive or stressful feelings, I shift that energy into the pedals. It takes time for this tension to ease, but within the first 10 to 15 miles, I'm at ease. At times I feel that I'm in a lucid state, either from the enjoyment of riding and what's around me, or simply my low caloric intake. When getting back from a ride, I can feel a significant difference in my temper, patience, and tolerance for what comes next.
I love Zach's story about having this constant that he can take with him from place to place as he moved. I think that's important for a lot of people, is having self-care strategies that are mobile and that they can transport with them wherever they are. And he also talks about pushing his difficult feelings into the pedals. And I think about that lots of self-care activities have certain ways of releasing tension and stress. That can be, some people do kinds of exercises that involve contraction and release in order to release stress from their bodies and sometimes their minds too. And also, what really stood out is that he's getting a kind of exercise that involves deep breathing. And I've read some about how important sighing is, which is a type of deep breathing, that the act of sighing can be a really effective stress reduction technique because it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system and helps calm our body and mind. And that we can actually do that deliberately. I know when I've been in tough times and I had the impulse to sigh, you can actually amplify it and get an amplified experience of release from that. So I thought, Kara, you might want to talk about some of the science behind some of those things that I've just mentioned, or maybe there's other things you'd like to discuss about Zach's story.
So, in terms of exercise, exercise releases endorphins and dopamine, which enhance mood. And regular exercise not only decreases symptoms of depression and anxiety, but surprisingly, it builds self-esteem over time. I've listened to this several times, and one thing that just jumped out at me that has never hit me before is the aspect of ritual in what Zachary does. And ritual can be really helpful in a self-care practice because, like Pavlov's dogs, we can learn that something is relaxing or replenishing, and our body can react automatically to that. We have three emotional regulation systems, and Zachary's talking about one of them, which is replenishing our emotional gas tank. One of them is feeling feelings, which is very important for emotional regulation, but that can drain our emotional gas tank, so we can't do that all the time. And the third is distracting, which it neither replenishes nor drains, and that is kind of neutral. It's fine to do sometimes, but you don't want to do that all the time. So we need some of all three of these in our life. And Zachary's describing the replenishing, and he's also describing ritual.
Well, this next reflection comes from someone very close to my own heart, my 89-year-old mother, go. After experiencing a deep personal loss, she's thoughtfully and steadily rebuilt a life that continues to hold meaning and joy. Her approach to self-care is practical and grounded, reminding us that even after heartbreak, it's possible to nourish ourselves and create something whole and new. Here's Go.
Hi, my name is Go, and I'm mom to Debra Sloss, your host. I'm 86 years old, so obviously I've lived long enough to have weathered many storms and experienced joyful highs. I lost my adorable husband 6 years ago after 40 years of adventurous marriage. 2 years later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a mastectomy. That was the point where I realized I was truly alone and no longer had my sweetheart to share the support through sickness and in health. I wasted no time deciding what would make my life joyful again. I missed my friends, so many of them were ill or dead, and I needed new, young, healthy friends. Also, I missed playing rummikub with my honey. I put notices on meetup.com and nextdoor.com, and I met several new friends for playing games and for dining out on sushi, my favorite food. I began giving games night at my home twice a month. Then the pandemic hit. A new friend and I set up Zoom games every Sunday evening, and we played online for 18 months. As soon as everyone was vaccinated, we began meeting again in person. And because some of our Zoom gamers have relocated, we still play online. And speaking of Zoom, my daughters live in 3 different states. So since the pandemic began, we meet on Zoom every Sunday morning, and I get to see more of them than ever. I love my computer and my iPhone. They are my link to the world. I write humorous journals, and I send them to friends and family, and I get appreciative feedback from it. It keeps me in touch with friends near and far. My brother and sister are also in their 80s, and we meet every Thursday for bowling and lunch afterwards. We laugh and joke about our childhood and our declining bowling scores. I'm an avid reader, so although libraries were closed, those little free libraries in the neighborhood kept me supplied with interesting books. So what's my joy? Keeping an active mind and building new friendships makes life fun and interesting. Social contact is very important to me, and so is laughter. I keep my social calendar on my iPhone, and I feel happy every day when I wake up to a new plan. These mental, social, and physical activities are definitely my soul food. What's most important is that I made it all happen.
What an absolute joy. I'll let you start with this one, Deborah, since she's near and dear to your heart.
She is near and dear to my heart. And there's so many things that stand out. I just marvel at my mom. And some of the things that really stood out to me is number one, courage and risk. She was willing to courageously reach out, connect with new people, take the risk of possible rejection or, people not reciprocating in order to make new friends. And she continues to do that. You've been listening to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm your host, Debra Sloss. Today's episode is all about self-care for hard times, those simple yet powerful practices that help us nourish our bodies, minds, and spirits when life feels overwhelming. We're hearing from community members who generously shared the soul food that helps them stay grounded and resilient. These stories were first submitted back in 2022, just as we emerged from the pandemic. But we're bringing them back because they remain relevant and helpful for today as we face these unprecedented, difficult times. I'll be reflecting on these contributions with returning guest Kara Bowman, a Santa Cruz, California based therapist with deep expertise in grief, trauma, and resilience. If you're just joining us, you may want to go back and catch the earlier stories, ranging from breathwork to biking, from music to meaningful connection. Each of them highlights a different way people have learned to care for themselves through tough times. And now, back to Kara and me, discussing the ways Go approaches her self-care. You talked a little bit about ritual and the importance of ritual, and I just want to mention that she talks about the weekly Zoom calls. We're still doing them. So it's been over 5 years now, every Sunday, and it's been this wonderfully rich and deepening practice that our conversations just keep going further, and we keep getting to know each other in new ways. So that's been a really, I think, when we talk about the value of connection for our mental well-being, which plays a very big part that I'm sure you'll talk about, that's been a very skillful way she's been going about that. And I really do want to mention that play. We don't often talk about play in self-care, but play is so important. It gives our brains a chance to rest. It gives us joy. I know when I was raising children, they talked about play as the work of children, but I think it continues to be a really important part of our lives, even as we grow into adulthood. And you might be able to say more about that. Go demonstrates personal agency, that ability to affect and improve one's own situation. And that is incredibly empowering to people when they can exercise that kind of agency to actually make things better for themselves. So, for instance, one thing that I would often do with clients in practice is I would teach them over time to begin to ask themselves the question when they were really struggling and having a hard time to ask themselves, is there anything I can do to help myself? And that really helps develop and foster that personal agency and empowerment. I think that's all I'd say. That's a lot. But what about you, Kara? What would you want to say about Go's contribution?
You're right that connection is really important. I came across something that really struck me. Isolation is a risk factor for mortality as strong as smoking. So that's how important social connections are. And that's true even of people who are introverted, I'm sorry. So introverts need time to replenish themselves, but they still need connection too. So play and rest have four components. One is distraction from everyday concerns. Another is allowing your mind to slow down so it can't be difficult cognitively. A third is giving yourself a break from other people or stresses from other people. So it can't be with your boss at work or that kind of thing, somebody who's a difficult connection. And the fourth is being guilt-free. And this is often the one we have the most trouble with in our society. And I think Go has that mastered. So we can't feel guilty while we're resting or playing, or it actually won't be replenishing. The last thing I want to say is there are different techniques for self-care in chronic stress than there are in normal times. And this is a time of high societal stress. I won't go into all the measures of that, but this is a time, 2025, when we tick all the boxes for high societal stress. And the most effective techniques in order of effectiveness for high chronic stress are one, breathing, grounding, meditating, which Go mentioned. Two, social connection and active service, which she mentioned. Three, journaling or connection to meaning, which could be spirituality. Four, sleep or non-sleep rest or play. Five, physical movement or exercise. And six, boundaries and saying no, which she mentioned, behavioral boundaries, emotional boundaries, or it could be media limits, which you mentioned. And so those are the six most effective techniques for dealing with chronic stress. She mentioned every one of them. And clustering these behaviors actually gives the best results in terms of resilience and mental health.
Now for something brief but deeply nourishing. In this next piece, Connor shares how he turns to two timeless sources of comfort and connection. His words are a simple yet powerful reminder that caring for ourselves can start with something as everyday and essential as a shared treat or meal with a friend. Here's Connor.
Hi, my name is Connor, and my soul food quite literally is donuts and sandwiches. I love to have donuts and sandwiches with friends. The beauty of memory is most ingrained in me in nature going for walks with friends. So, my ideal soul food is coffee, donuts, and a nature walk with friends. To make the day even more extraordinary, we would go for a long drive to get a gourmet sandwich in a different town and listen to sentimental music on the car ride there. My soul food helps me with feelings of being stuck when the light doesn't seem to be coming in. It also helps me to feel joy and not think too much. I have been going out of my general way to get gourmet sandwiches for a long time now, and it's been a really helpful practice. Thanks.
Connor, would you like to start?
So, in normal times, self-care focuses on thriving and growth, and it can require some effort and energy. In times of stress, either societal or personal, self-care focus is a little bit more on emotional regulation, resilience, and having a protective emotional buffer. And it should be a little lower effort and soothing. And that's what I hear here. Connor's is easy, it's soothing, and he's got ritual in it, so he knows what to do. I'll just say a little bit about nature. Nature is very restorative, and I saw this research. It was really funny. They put people in nature and they felt better, and then they made the amount of nature smaller and smaller and smaller. So they had people in cities walking and looking up at those puny little treetops, and they got to work more relaxed than the people who didn't look up. And then they just put a picture of nature on people's desktops, and people were still more relaxed. So it takes a very, very small amount of nature to trigger us into a state of relaxation. I put a screensaver of Yosemite on my computer, and I can't believe how often I get lost looking at it. So nature seems to trigger something in us that relaxes us.
You know, another thing that he talked about was putting on sentimental music, and it made me think of something that's come up in many of our state of mind stories that other people have shared over time, that they will often put on music to help them feel the feelings that they are having. It struck me that he was using music, that sentimental music may be helping him to process his own feelings by listening to that. This next offering comes from one of our fellow radio show hosts here at KSQD, Suki. In it, she reminds us that singing, yes, even if you don't think you sing well, can be a joyful and healing way to feed the soul. Her story highlights how music and voice can uplift, connect, and carry us through no matter our skill level. Here's Suki.
My name is Suki. I am a writer and an online educator. My soul food is music. I grew up with music all around me. My mom was a piano teacher, and all my siblings studied at least one instrument. We were all at some point in orchestra or band or part of a rock band, and we had a pile of well-worn records that ranged from the Renaissance to Billy Idol. For a while when I was a young adult, I thought I'd like to try to be a professional musician, and I was disappointed in myself for not pursuing that. Music wasn't really soul food at that point because of my sense of disappointment. Raising children changed my perspective. I realized that our culture doesn't cherish amateurism as it should. So many kids would tell me that they couldn't sing, but of course, everyone can sing. We don't have to be professionals to make joyful noise. Now that my children are grown, making music feeds my soul in a valuable way. If I've had a hard day, I might be tempted to sit down and watch a video, but I feel much better if I sing instead. Singing is a full body, full mind experience. People sometimes ask if I meditate, and I answer no, I sing. I love to sing old songs because they make me feel connected to all the people who have sung those songs through the ages. As a parent, I really can't think of a more important gift that we can give our children than the gift of music just for the sake of pleasure. I know that when I was young, I was focused way too much on music as a public act or as a product. Now I am happy to sing, whether or not anyone is listening.
How lovely. This was a realization I came to fairly late in my life, but I love that she talks about non-striving in the self-care activity that she's doing, which for her is singing and music. And I feel like I hear that in many of the contributions, and maybe that's even an element of the play. The idea that you are doing something sheerly for the joy of doing it and not because you have to be working at getting better at it or even be good at it. Personally, I found it really liberating to unhook from the idea that you have to be good at everything you do and just to really experience the sort of joy in doing something, whether you're good or not, and allowing yourself that room. There's actually an added level of joy about that, about doing something badly and joyfully. And I think she kind of touches on that when she says making joyful noise. I love that phrase that she uses. The other thing it got me to think about was my grandfather, who he liked to self-refer to himself as the wood butcher, which we all laughed at when we were kids. But, he just didn't think that he had the most refined skills. But I can just remember the look and the peace in his face and the joy when he would be there, on his lathe or oiling a bowl that he had just made. Um, and so I want to encourage listeners to give themselves that room to do things for the joy only and not necessarily to have to be any good at it at all.
When we're doing something for the joy of doing something, what strikes me is that we're present. We're not being perfectionists. We're not thinking about the outcome. And presence is so good for us. Not only is it good for our mental health, but it also reduces stress hormones and inflammation. And it has all these wonderful physical effects, reduces heart disease, hypertension, cholesterol, and diabetes, unbelievably. It brings greater optimism, greater sense of purpose, and greater emotional well-being. So presence is just like a magic elixir. Music reduces stress, and in addition to reducing depression, it can help manage pain, improve sleep, improve mood, and improve motivation. It can help us regulate our emotions and process them because we engage our limbic system, which is involved in emotional processing and memory. So, music is something very inbred to people and very deep, and it stimulates the vagal nerve, as we were talking about with breathing. It also connects us to humanity throughout the ages. So she was talking about different types of music, and when we are singing music or listening to music or thinking about music even, it triggers all the other people who have sung those songs, listened to those songs, created those songs, and we feel connected to common humanity. And that is a key to self-compassion. So music is very connecting.
I love that. And the one other thing that she talked about that I think is an important point is that it's important sometimes to return to something that we've tried before. And I think this is true. I saw this as a therapist working with people around their own self-care. They'd say, "Oh, I've tried mindfulness," or "Oh, I've tried that and it doesn't work for me." But the interesting thing is that sometimes when we have a shift in our own mindset, like Suki talked about, returning to music without the striving of needing to be so good at it, and then suddenly she found the rewards and joy that existed in that for her. And so I want to encourage listeners to consider that it's worthwhile sometimes returning to things that we may have tried before, because we might be able to bring our own new mindset to it and have a new experience with it.
That's a wonderful idea. I often say that hasn't changed, but you've changed. So try it again.
Nice, nice. Well, next we hear from Kelly, and she shares how her self care practices have evolved with time, age, and shifting life circumstances. She reminds us that the self care that nourishes us deeply often changes as we do. Here's Kelly.
What is my soul food? The timing of this question is interesting, coming on the heels of a global pandemic, which for me has happened to coincide with an empty nest and the onset of arthritic knee pain, which has rendered me unable to hike, a huge source of soul food in the past. As a semi-retired, long-married, 63-year-old hobbling mother of 2 adult daughters, I have had to reinvent myself and discover new ways to nurture my soul. About 2 years ago, I hired a personal trainer once a week to keep me in shape. This decision, one I almost didn't make for fear of spending too much money or that I should be motivating myself to work out, has turned out to be pivotal. Not only has my trainer become a friend and a regular connection in my life, I'm also getting into better shape than ever despite my knee issue. As I could only afford to hire my trainer 1 day a week, I sought out friends who might be interested in committing to another weekly workout. The prevalence of Zoom technology helped, as I had access to friends who lived farther away. After striking out a few times, I struck gold with a cousin. We now connect weekly for a workout and have been consistently meeting for over a year. This connection has fed my soul on so many levels. I love that she shows up. I love that we've become closer, and I love that we've been able to share our lives on a weekly basis and get a workout in, too. Another source of soul food is my husband. He and I have always been proponents of date night. For years, this has kept us close and connected and fed our souls. Typically, we would head out to the beach and walk for miles. When I couldn't walk anymore, we needed a new plan. I knew he liked to bike ride, so I suggested we make the switch. Now my husband and I ride bikes on date night and have so much fun discovering new routes and paths together. Dropping everything on a Friday afternoon to head out for date night with my husband is something we both look forward to. We both appreciate the commitment and the ritual, and for me, smelling the sweet ocean air from the bike path after dark is thrilling. On my own, I feed my soul by playing music. Although I've not been formally trained, I'm drawn to the keyboard and love to learn and practice new songs. I've become pretty good over the years and enjoy seeing my progress. Sometimes I even get to jam with friends, which feeds my soul even more. And I can't leave out the deliciousness of a morning sunrise, or the sight of a flock of parrots, or a gorgeous peregrine falcon flying overhead. Observing the nature around me is satiating on so many levels. And of course, there are random snacks that show up unexpectedly each week, like a text from my kids or phone calls from friends, an exciting vacation or a stimulating work experience. But when all else fails and the cupboard is bare, I feel like I have successfully cultivated a balanced diet of soul food that I can count on from week to week.
I love this. Kara, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. I love it too. What struck me here was all of our cultural myths that work against us in terms of self-care. One is that fun should be spontaneous, and she talked about planned fun, and that's just as real as spontaneous fun. Another is that connection should be effortless, and she has planned connection into her life. In reality, relationships take effort and care. They aren't effortless. We don't just live happily ever after. Another is that productivity is more important than fun. In reality, fun, rest, and connection fuel productivity. They go together. And there's a lot of research saying play is essential for mental health and creativity. And people who don't play and don't rest are actually less mentally healthy and less creative and less productive. And she didn't directly say this, but I'm guessing with her connections, and she did talk about grief, that she is feeling her feelings. And we have a myth that people shouldn't show emotion. And the reality is that strong and brave people feel emotions, and this is really necessary and really healthy. And I'm going to guess that Kelly is doing just that.
You've been listening to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm Debra Sloss, your host. Today, we're exploring the vital topic of self-care during hard times, a theme that feels especially urgent as so many of us face ongoing challenges, both personal and collective. Whether it's dealing with stress, grief, unprecedented uncertainty, or social unrest, how we care for ourselves matters deeply. In this episode, we're hearing from members of our community who back in 2022 generously shared the soul food that helped them stay resilient as we emerged from a global pandemic. From breath awareness to movement, music to meaningful connection, these practices nourish our bodies and minds and support us in weathering life's storms. Today, I'm joined by Kara Bowman, a marriage and family therapist who brings a compassionate clinical perspective on grief, trauma, and resilience. Together, we'll discuss the ways these small but powerful acts of self-care can rebuild strength and hope. If you're just tuning in, I encourage you to listen closely and consider what soul food might nourish your own well-being. Everyone's recipe is unique, and there's no right or wrong way to care for yourself. For detailed resources mentioned in this episode, visit our show page at stateofmindmedia.org. You'll find helpful links and support options. If you're feeling overwhelmed or in need of support, please know you're not alone. Reach out to your local mental health services or trusted community organizations. Taking that first step is an important act of self-care. And now, back to the show.
What stuck out to you?
Well, you said so many of the things I was thinking about, but the one piece that I would add is that that piece about predictability, sometimes we don't understand the value of the predictability itself, that it actually feeds us in the in-between times. So knowing that we have a date or that we have a connection coming up, we actually can feel fulfilled in the interim leading up to that connection. And it really does. I've seen this often with couples that are really struggling, helping them plan to have some connection time each week actually sometimes helps them maintain connection more strongly, even between those specifically planned connection times. So next we hear from Annie, a woman who knows the importance of tuning into her emotional well-being. Her story is both honest and inspiring, offering insight into the self-awareness she's cultivating early in her life. Here's Annie.
Hello, my name is Annie. I am someone with lived experience of mental health challenges, specifically bipolar disorder and depression. And I've also been working at local mental health organizations for the last 5 years. My soul food is yoga. I found it at 16 when my friend dragged me to a hot yoga studio. I made it through my first class as a puddle of sweat, exhausted, but somehow feeling enlightened and full of joy. In the 11 years since then, I've tried all different kinds and am now even certified to teach it. When I do yoga, I feel like a glow stick that's been cracked. I almost always go in stiff, tense, and stressed from the day. But when I start stretching my body and sync my breathing with my movements, I'm met with a sense of peace, ease, and stillness. Everything around me seems to just melt away, and as my physical muscles become more flexible, so does my inner world. I find that even after 10 minutes of this, I have more patience and bandwidth. Yoga is my most favorite way to stay compassionate, relaxed, and in touch with my body. I'm so grateful for it, especially during the pandemic. Thanks for listening.
Well, I think I'll jump in on this one just because I have been a person who's done yoga for many years. And what I really love about what Annie shares is that even 10 minutes of it makes a difference for her. I know for myself, I used to go to yoga classes, and for many, many years, I did not do any yoga at home on my own. I thought I had to go to a class and that it had to be a full hour and a half and you had to do all the sequences for it to be meaningful. And then it was a huge discovery for me to realize that even just taking 5 or 10 minutes could be incredibly regulatory. And so I love that Annie points that out, that she experiences and notices that change, even taking 5 or 10 minutes. And I think that kind of aligns with that idea that even just taking 10 deep breaths can change your internal state and lead to more self-regulation and a calmer state. The other piece about yoga that is so beautiful that she talks about is that piece of personal agency. It's something you can do yourself to help both your body and your mind feel better, and it's in your control. And most of the things we're talking about are like that, but oftentimes people can address real physical pain with yoga if they've learned how to do that correctly.
And it doesn't have to be yoga. You get the same benefits from Tai Chi, Qigong, fencing, any martial art, dance, anything where you're connected to your body, noticing your body, getting feedback from your body. And these things not only have mental health effects, they also help people manage chronic pain, help people quit smoking, lose weight, help with symptoms of menopause, all kinds of wonderful positive effects. These things work by deactivating the stress system. So we aren't made to live in the stress system. We're made to live in this well-being system, kind of where we're humming along. And in our society, we have so many things thrown at us that we're often living in this activated state all of the time. And sometimes we jump over to this pleasure system, which is also an activated state, but we very rarely live in this low level, peaceful well being state. And these things that I just named deactivate the stress system and lead us to live in this well-being state. So in the stress system, we have a lot of blood pumping to our muscles because we're ready to act. We have glucose going to the base of our brain, which reacts, rather than to the prefrontal cortex, which thinks. And so going back to this state of relaxation actually helps us respond better rather than react, and helps our body be healthier.
To close out our collection of self-care stories, we're going to turn to Carol. She shares how even in the face of overwhelming challenges, it's the small, consistent steps towards self-care that have helped her find steadiness and strength. Her message is a powerful reminder that healing often begins with just one manageable shift at a time. Here's Carol.
Hello, my name is Carol. My story includes a lifelong struggle with anxiety. I have and continue to struggle balancing a professional career with mindfully raising my two wonderful, now adult children. The younger of the two, my son, has obsessive compulsive disorder with harm-based intrusive thoughts. He's a sweet man who has intense depth, overthinks absolutely everything, and is fittingly a philosophy major in college. Sadly, just last month he had a second mental breakdown. He spent a number of weeks in the hospital on suicide watch and is entering a partial hospitalization program this week. He is at home, and I'm currently on leave from work to care for him. As you can imagine, today my cup is runneth over with feelings. I'm grieving and heartbroken for the young man who is trying to cope with a mental illness. I see what it does to his life, and I'm angry at the unfairness of it all. My greatest fear is that he succumbs to his mental state and takes his life. I move from this terrible thought to the less important anxiety caused by his recent exit from college in his senior year. I worry that finishing college may not happen. I just want his life to be easier with less hardship. My mind is exhausted, and all of these thoughts play in my head like a broken record over and over again. I'm doing my best to survive the current storm. In the past, extreme stress saw me either emotionally wrecked, rolled up into a ball in bed, or distracting my mind by taking on large projects around the house with a fury. Through either wisdom with age, spending time with the right people, or just dumb luck, I've thankfully turned more to self-care. I prioritize it now more than ever. To stay mentally balanced, I require weekly therapy sessions, regular meditation, exercise and massage, planned relaxation, and a good night's sleep. I'm not perfect at any of these and continue to struggle, but the benefits are clear, and food for the soul is a perfect way to describe the small changes that have led me to a happier, more productive life. Today, taking care of myself means that I'm more emotionally available and present for my son. We are meditating together, taking daily hikes, emoting regularly, and talking continually. His mental health is improving a little each day. I know that even through times of strife, prioritizing my soul food means the clouds of anxiety and pain will subside more quickly. Eventually, today's challenges will pass, and life will open up a new window or door where the rays of happiness will once again shine through.
It's beautiful. I really feel for her, and I'm really inspired by her. It reminds me of this quote. Unfortunately, the author's unknown, but it says, "Self-care is not a detour on the road to helping others. It is the road." And she has really learned that. So we will continue to use childhood coping mechanisms as adults unless we actively work to change them. And Carol did just that. She worked to change her coping mechanisms until she found ones that worked for herself. And there are 5 different areas of self-care, and she hits every one of them. And I'll read them a little bit slowly to you, and you can maybe think of yourself and how you're doing in each of these areas of self-care. One is sensory, ways to calm our bodies and mind. One is emotional, a sense of accomplishment or control, filling the emotional bank. One is spiritual, connecting with meaning, values, purpose, or a higher power. Physical, exercise and eating well. And the final one is social, nurturing relationships with others and not doing it if you're introverted. So I think I'll end with that because Carol just beautifully illustrated all of those. Debra?
Well, the other thing that I think Carol did so beautifully is that she was able to set aside what we often have as a negative stereotype of needing a lot or being a high maintenance person. I love that she just embraced that she is a highly sensitive person, that she needs all these different things to be in place for her to feel well and even better day by day. And I think that we all have those ways of self-judgment that get in the way of us taking care of ourselves sometimes. So I hope people will keep Carol in mind and think that she's like a Maserati that needs fine tuning and good oil and a smooth road so that she can perform at her very best. I guess the last thing that I would say that doing all that, just like loving your race car is an act of self-love. And, most of what we've talked about today is how do we love ourselves enough to take care of ourselves?
Yes. And Anne Lamott said, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you.
What we heard today proves that self-care isn't one size fits all, and it doesn't need to be complicated. It's about what works for you, what fills your tank, grounds your body, soothes your nervous system, or helps you feel more like yourself. In hard times, it's easy to forget that we have agency. These stories remind us we can choose to pay attention to our needs. We can choose to rest. We can choose to seek joy, even in small doses. So as you step back into your day, ask yourself, what's one small thing I can do to support myself today? Just one. That's where resilience begins. Whatever you've taken from listening today, hold on to it. Feed your soul. These times may be hard, But your care for yourself is powerful medicine. May you find a little more ease, a little more breath, and a little more soul food for the road ahead. You've been listening to State of Mind. Being human and living well.
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 I want to say a huge thank you to my guest today, Kara Bowman, and to all our contributors for submitting their very special audio stories. And thanks to you for joining us. If you found today's show helpful, you may also want to check out episode 77 on harnessing awe, a simple and accessible mindfulness practice. Episode 79 on aging with resilience, wisdom for living fully at every age. And finally, episodes 53, 54, and 55, our Creativity and Wellness series, exploring the power of writing, art, movement, and dance for supporting mental health. New episodes of State of Mind are released the first Sunday of every month. You can find our complete archive at stateofmindmedia.org. If you missed part of today's episode or you just want to hear it again, be sure to subscribe to the State of Mind podcast on your favorite platform. Special thanks to our team, Yusuf Hassanain for audio production and volunteer coordination, Vijay Luca and Jeannie Baldzakowski for audio production, Patrice Vecchioni for In Your Voice story coaching, Tanmai Karamani for transcriptions, Priscilla Yee and Grishma Jain for graphic design, Nimilan Ellen Chauvin for marketing, Lon Tron for data management, Jennifer Young, Heather Franks, and Katrina Tattenham for research. And special thanks to musician Adrian Legg and Favored Nations Entertainment for our theme music. State of Mind was developed and originally broadcast in partnership with KSQD-FM in Santa Cruz, California. We always want to hear from listeners and community members just like you. You can submit your very own In Your Voice recording and become part of the conversation. Simply call in or record an audio file right on your phone. Tell us about a mental health experience you've had, something that's contributed to your recovery, or share a resource that's been helpful. We want to hear from you, and your voice may just be featured on one of our future episodes. Submission details can be found at stateofmindmedia.org. Join us again next month for another episode of State of Mind. Until then, live well.